takes it 59-52.
It's 1973, and a small all-girls Catholic school is about to win its second straight national championship. This is the story of Immaculata, one of the original little schools that could. Their rise and eventual dynasty was the first of its kind in women's basketball, and their team became an incubator for some of the best coaches of the 1980s while influencing others all over the Philadelphia area. But first, let's take it back to the beginning. So Philadelphia was dominated by a massive Catholic population in the 1960s and 70s. Whether Irish, Italian, Polish, or otherwise, the grade school population topped out around 250,000 kids in 1964, which gave way to the Catholic League's dominance in boys and girls basketball.
There was no thought of women playing sports for anything other than for fun. So we went to school. I saw signups for basketball, and I love basketball. So my high school friend and I went to the same college, Green Muth, Portland. And so we went and signed up and played, and, we had a pretty good team.
But women's college basketball wasn't a dominant force in the world just yet. Title IX only had gone into effect in 1972, and schools were just finding their footing. Adding to that was the fact that while all these girls were on playgrounds playing 5-on-5 basketball with the boys, when they would go to school and play girls' sports, 5-on-5 wasn't a thing. And up until 1972, it was a relatively new concept for women.
Two only played defense, two only played offense, and the other two could go back and forth. So it was kind of slow and boring, although I still loved it. Because that's what you knew. That was what your game was. So you played it and you loved it. And so then when that changed, maybe my junior year in high school.
So with no real plan to go and play college basketball, Judy and her friend Renee Muth signed up for basketball at Immaculata. And it was there that she met Teresa Grenz, who was Teresa Schenk at the time, and their head coach Kathy Rush, who was still around 22 years old when she took the job and was coaching kids that weren't all that much younger than she was.
She was 23, not that big of an age difference,
Yeah.
but she was married and starting a family, so she just seemed older. And she coached that way. She didn't coach like she was a peer age-wise. She coached with authority, and she didn't just become your buddy. She was your coach, and we all respected that.
Drawing on her husband Ed's connections as an NBA referee and her own contacts in the world of college basketball, Kathy Rush was something of an early innovator, and she knew the power of salesmanship. With Teresa as the leading center on the team, Immaculata started to dominate in 1972 until they ran up on the power of the day, Philadelphia's Westchester University, in the AIAW regional tournament.
I knew we were good and we had fun playing. I guess maybe two eye-openers. One would be when we played Westchester and got blown out. I was like, wow, I thought we were pretty good. And we get blown out by Westchester.
So after a 70-38 loss, the Macs limped into the national tournament, the 15th out of 16 seeds and facing a long climb back to the title. But they won, and they won, and they won again until they saw Westchester again. So the Macs went out and did the impossible. They pulled off the upset.
It's surreal when I look back, because at the time playing, you did it because you loved it. You just loved it. And boy, was it fun to win. You know, that made it so much fun. But then the season was over and you went on to other things. You didn't play all year long. There wasn't AAU. There wasn't summer leagues. There wasn't all that. So I think it really hit me. The books, the newspaper articles, and every year we would laugh when the Final Four would come up. They'd always want to talk to somebody from Immaculata. But I think it was when they made that movie.
So the first dynasty in women's basketball post-Title IX kicks off. The Mighty Macs captivate not only the Catholic world, but they take over the sports scene in Philadelphia. Renee Muth's dad brought a bucket and a wooden dowel to a game one time and used it as a noisemaker, and soon it created an entire group of fans that called themselves the Bucket Brigade. The nuns came out to support, and the Catholic League of High Schoolers in Philly adopted Immaculata as an extension of themselves. And noticing this popularity, everybody wanted a piece. The Macs played in the first nationally televised game in women's basketball history. They dominated Maryland, and then they followed that up by being the first women's program to ever play in Madison Square Garden against Queens College.
A bigger scale, I knew the Garden was, a mecca of college basketball too. I mean, pro basketball. So it was kind of cool to go in there. Now we've never played in a building that big. So that was kind of fun. Then warming up and the number of people that came to the game to see us, to see Immaculata. And I've read those stories where there was like 12,000 maybe for the game. And then the men's game after, there was only like 6,000.
Now, Judy was pretty close. It was actually over 11,000 that showed up to MSG for the game. And the legend is, half of them cleared out when the men played. You go look back at the stats, and it was actually true. The men's game that came on after the women only had about 6,000. So over and over and over again, the Macs won. It took 3 national titles before another contender emerged. But as the decade began to turn towards the 1980s, Title IX opened the door for athletic scholarships. Immaculata, a school of only 500 or so young women, made the determination that they didn't have the resources to compete with the likes of Texas, LSU, Tennessee, and others. So with 3 national championships before the age of 26, Kathy Rush decided to step down. It was one of the biggest shocks in the sport that still reverberates. She had opportunities to coach at Rutgers and interviewed at Maryland. In the winter months, San Diego State's athletic director would call her and give her weather reports to try and entice her to come to California. But with Ed still refereeing and her kids growing up, Kathy told Immaculata's president that she'd be done. In 1977, the Macs got to the AIAW Final Four and lost to LSU. And that was that. But what if she had stayed?
Maybe she probably could have won Division III championships, but I think if she had gone to a bigger school, Rutgers or somewhere, I think she obviously would have done really well because she really had that drive, to succeed. She was competitive, so she would have had the drive to make it work.
The Macs never replicated the form of that early period of women's basketball, but their impact is all over the game. Renee Muth Portland went off to coach at Colorado and eventually Penn State. Teresa Grentz won a 1982 AIAW national title with Rutgers and then built the Illinois program from scratch. Marianne Stanley was a starting guard for the Macs during their title run, went on to Old Dominion where she won more national championships as a coach before heading to Stanford and to USC and then the WNBA. The Macs not only retain a legacy as the first dynasty in this era of women's basketball, but a story that people could easily wrap their arms around, especially in the Catholic communities of the Northeast.
I think there is a legacy, and I think if Westchester had gone on and won, it wouldn't be the same because they were phys ed majors. They were athletes, in a lot of sense, not just for basketball, but they were real women that were athletes in a lot of sports and went to school for physical education was their major. And we didn't have that major. So I think being that all girls and just something about playing for the love of the sport.
Immaculata's rise, their coaching ideas, tactics, and talent paved the way for schools to follow them. Philadelphia remains one of the overlooked spiritual homes of women's hoops. And as the sport continues to progress and advance in ways that the women of Immaculata could have never imagined at the time, the work that they did, along with the other great programs of old to build up the sport in the wake of Title IX, makes them worthy of recognition in the Legendarium of women's basketball.